This is J-Ram.
And this is Billy.
We're back with another edition of Hot Takes.
And today we're going to be talking about GMOs, what the proponents, what the detractors think. Is it good for you? Is it bad for you? Is it harmful or not? James, what do you think?
Harmful.
Really?
Yeah.
You think they're harmful? Like harmfully? Like you think it'll kill you one day?
Probably.
Like Logan from from fucking Logan? Did I say Logan from Logan?
I think he said Logan from Wolverine.
A Wolverine from Logan?
Yeah. That makes just as little sense.
Whatever.
But yeah, kind of like that. My night pharmacist Mark was talking about it with a pharmacy tech, and he was raising some good points.
What kind of points did he raise?
Well, I don't want to misquote him, but I know he was talking about the dangers of GMOs, and that one thing in particular I remember is that we don't know the long-term effects. Sure, it might seem safe now, but 10, 15 years later, we might go, oopsie, I made a mistake.
Yeah, true. And it would be kind of hard to go back to a world without GMOs, too.
At this point,
so, I mean,
yes.
yes, there are cons to having GMOs, but what I would say is I think that the pros definitely outweigh the cons. Like the benefits outweigh the risks, in my opinion. And I mean, we'll get into some of the nitty gritty of the arguments, but life expectancy continues to increase as time goes on. So it doesn't seem like this is something that is harming us. Otherwise, you would start to see that life expectancy still going down. Which, did you know that life expectancy increases 1 year every 4 years? Like, it's been going on that trend for quite a long while. And by the time we're elderly, I guess, is that even a politically correct term to use? Elderly? Like over 75? Isn't that?
I don't know.
Anyway, whenever we're around that age, the life expectancy would be in the triple digits by then if the trend continues. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, of course. So we get to miss out on that. That's just about fair, isn't it?
I don't think it's that. I think we'll probably benefit from a lot of the advances. And
I want a robot body. I want to live forever. We've been through
says
this.
The guy who's terrified of artificial intelligence.
I mean, yeah, it's gonna doom us all, but if I'm one of the robot overlords, I won't really care.
But what I'm saying is with life expectancy continuing to rise, it seems to me, at least, the GMOs are more beneficial than they are harmful. Like, there might be some bad. I haven't been able to find anything on the internet showing that this particular GMO was found to be harmful to humans or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I could see how there are definitely going to be pros and cons, but I just don't know, man. I think humans are so short-sighted that we will never really consider that whether the temporary benefits will outweigh the long-term costs.
Well,
that'll be our downfall as a civilization. That's how I feel. Like, our species will be, when our species ends, because just about every species that takes control of the food chain eventually dies off.
Not in all cases. I mean, like, look at the shark. It's been an apex predator for millions of years.
But it's slowly being killed off by us.
Yeah, because we're fucking polluting the oceans and shit.
That's what I'm saying. Eventually, we'll get to a point where something takes us down, and I think it's going to be that.
I think
we're so short-sighted that we don't weigh the costs.
Okay, my bet is on a superbug. I think a superbug's going to wipe out a good, huge chunk of humanity. I think that there will probably be some people that would be naturally immune to like any sort of, virus or whatever out there. But so there might be some survivors, but it's not going to be millions of people on the planet anymore. It'll be, numbered in the thousands.
Ooh.
I mean, it's happened before. There was a bottleneck in our evolution.
All right. So let's go with this for a second.
Yeah.
You're one of the thousands left on Earth. Do you think monogamy and all of the current social constructs just go out the window?
I guess it depends on what cultures survive. Like, there may be some isolated people, who have, I mean, we could look at a whole different progression for civilization in that case. Depends on how far we're set back technologically speaking. I mean, if there's not a lot of scientists and, really smart people like engineers and stuff that survive, I mean, you're looking at set back hundreds of years.
Or we're just frozen in the current time we are.
Well, I mean, eventually things break down and you got to know how to fix them or make them, or, got to be able to educate people on how to do all of these things, how to maintain the infrastructure and stuff that we have today. Look at like The Walking Dead. But going back to GMOs, there's been a lot of really good things that's happened because of GMOs. Like, James, that we're ever so, we're inching ever further towards that 10 billion mark on the amount of people on this planet. And GMOs makes it possible for us to have such large crop yields
But maybe
to
we
feed all of
shouldn't
these
be
people.
reaching that number.
Well-
maybe some of them need to die off so the rest of the world can survive.
Okay, Thanos. Well, we can discuss overpopulation in another episode because that's a super interesting topic. But for the purposes of this podcast, overpopulation is kind of like an overblown issue because eventually, whenever we reach the high end of the population that the environment can sustain, we kind of level off naturally. Like less people will be giving birth. Like we have more access to contraceptives and stuff like that. In more developed countries, people have less kids, so the population tends to kind of level off. And we've actually already seen a lot of that in European countries already, like Germany, France. Like their populations are starting to level off, and their replacement rate is almost exactly what their death rate is now. So it's like they have a pretty much a stable population. So and I expect that
America will join that?
will eventually, yeah, but we have a lot of room to fill in America. You know, I mean, there's some inhospitable places here.
Death Valley.
Yeah. But I mean, take for instance, like GMOs that make it possible for like corn to be produced in places like Death Valley. You're
So
actually
GMOs make it basically possible to make the deserts fertile.
could be. Maybe. I mean, it depends on what genes that you can edit, because GMOs is basically...
What are GMOs, Ryan?
Yeah, I guess we need to talk about what exactly... So GMOs is an acronym for genetically modified organism. And we've been genetically modifying plants for millennia now. I mean, if you look at... I'm serious, though, because if you look back at the way the banana used to be, there used to be so many seeds in a banana, you could barely eat it. It was like mush with a ton of seeds all in it, and we selectively bred them over the course of years to where we've bred the seed out of the banana, and now it is what we have today. The banana is not naturally what we eat today.
People also say, though, that the food tastes worse.
Like what? What do you mean?
Like people say bananas don't taste the same. I've heard that before.
Well, I actually have a good anecdote for that. Is because we used to eat the Gros Michel, and now we eat the Cavendish. So it's two different breeds of banana. Used to, they were sweeter, a little fatter, shorter. That's the Gros Michel. But it became extinct because of a blight that attacked that particular kind. The Cavendish was immune to it, and so the Cavendish is what we have today. And did you know that every single banana that you eat is a genetically identical version of every other banana in the world? They're all the exact same organism. They're all clones. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
The banana is actually a huge feat in human ingenuity. But the problem is now they're suspecting that another blight might come and knock out the Cavendish. And it could be that within our lifetime, James, bananas may become extinct.
You mean we'll be telling our kids what bananas used to be?
Think about it. They'll never get to have a peanut butter and banana sandwich. That's terrible.
Just imagine the fact that, like, instead of being like, in my day we had payphones, we'll be like, in my day we had bananas. Like... Dude, that Gwen Stefani song is not going to age well. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. What's that, Grandpa? Oh, well, let me tell you, there used to be this fruit called a banana. Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Tomatoes.
Yeah, tomatoes.
You were telling me tomatoes don't taste as good. Mr. GMOs are great.
Now, I mean, I'm not going to say there's not drawbacks from GMOs, but at the same time, well, okay. The thing about tomatoes is they edited a gene to where the tomatoes were more red because people wouldn't buy tomatoes if they still were green in some spots. And so
fried green tomatoes are great.
Yeah, but people want ripe tomatoes and they want that bright red color, but natural tomatoes don't really have those bright red colors all the time. And so even though they'd be perfectly good tomatoes, people wouldn't buy them and they just rot in grocery stores. So they were like, how do we get people to buy tomatoes? Well, let's edit this gene to where it makes them more red in color so that people will buy them. But the gene that also determines the color of the tomato also determines the starch content of the fruit. Mm-hmm. And that's why now it's more like fibrous and it's not as sweet as it was or as it is if you have homegrown tomatoes.
Because in the Middle Ages, they used to consider it a love fruit.
Yeah, and then after that, they thought it was poisonous because the plant that the tomato grows from is actually deadly. It's nightshade. Just like potatoes. They thought potatoes and tomatoes were toxic because the plants that produce them are toxic.
Now, have you heard that you can ripen bananas by taking an apple, poking it with a knife or a needle or a fork?
You don't even have to poke it.
And put it in a bag, and it ripens Could they have done that with tomatoes? Do you think it would work on tomatoes? Like if you took a green tomato and an apple and you just kind of poked the apple apple, put it in a bag overnight, do you think you'd get a ripe tomato in the morning?
Probably, but I'm not a botanist, so I couldn't tell you that. But I do know that what causes the plant to ripe, or the fruit to ripe, is ethylene gas, and apples produce ethylene as well as the tips of the bananas. That's why sometimes they'll say cut the tip off the banana and leave it in a bag, and the ethylene that's released out of the stem will cause the banana to ripen quicker.
Now, you were telling me about cotton candy grapes?
That are not GMOs, I found out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're not GMOs. They actually selectively bred a bunch of different kinds of grapes together and then just happened to come across a flavor that tastes just like freaking cotton candy, man. I swear to God, they taste just like cotton candy. They taste really good, but they are a little too sweet. Like, I can only eat like a couple handfuls at a time, and then I'm like,
Too much sugar.
Yeah, too much. Well, I don't think they're bad for you, though. They just taste bad for you. So that's the best kind of snack.
Healthy,
Yeah.
but tastes like it'll kill you.
Yeah. But yeah, those aren't GMOs. But there are some drawbacks of GMOs.
So what are some pros and cons of GMOs?
Well, I'm glad you asked, James, because I found this website called procon.org, and
Which I bet we'll be using in a lot more hot takes.
yeah, probably.
I mean, I'm just saying, if they have this kind of research for almost any topic you and I come up with,
Yeah.
it'd be pretty helpful.
But yeah, they have a lot of good sources for these, but they come up with 3 pros and 3 cons. And so I'll just start with the first pro, and then you can talk about
I
the
will
cons.
rebuttal you, sir.
All right. So genetically modified crops have been proven safe through testing and use, and can even increase the safety of common foods. So it says, over the past 30 years of lab testing and 15 years of field research, there's not been a single health risk associated with GMO consumption. It's shown that GMOs are actually more thoroughly tested than any other product produced in the history of agriculture. Over 2,000 global studies have affirmed the safety of GM crops. Trillions of meals containing GMO ingredients have been eaten by humans over the past few decades, with 0 verified cases of illness related to the food being genetically altered. It also says GM crops can be engineered to reduce natural allergens and toxins, making them safer and healthier. And I actually read, James, that there's some people working on a hypoallergenic peanut. So, I mean, there's a potential that it could solve some of the problems that we've seen in, children. Like,
Let me propose to you this, though.
Okay.
Why all of a sudden is gluten allergy skyrocketing? I never heard of gluten allergies when I was a kid. Now it seems like almost everyone has a gluten allergy. My idea, it's the GMOs.
No, gluten allergy comes from celiac disease, which is actually really rare. The whole gluten fad is that's what it is. It's a fad. People think, oh, I've got a gluten intolerance or something. No, like if you have celiac disease, which is the only known reason for you to be allergic to gluten, then you would not be able to function eating gluten. Like your colon would
Well, could people
want to kill you.
People can't be gluten intolerant, though, just like they're lactose intolerant?
Well, I think celiac disease is the only proven case that shows that you can't have gluten. Otherwise, it's like you may feel bloated or something like that, but that's just eating carbs, dude. I mean, if you eat a big bowl of freaking macaroni and cheese, you'll feel super bloated. You know what I mean?
Or Olive Garden.
Olive Garden breadsticks.
And unlimited salad, the best.
The Cheddar Bay biscuits at Red Lobster.
Versus the Olive Garden breadsticks?
Which do you choose?
Breadsticks. They're unlimited. I get as many breadsticks as I want.
Same with Cheddar Bay biscuits?
Nah.
And then I always get them to bring me an extra one at the end of my meal so I can take like a bunch home. Always. Every single time.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I have a rebuttal to your comment, sir.
Okay.
Genetically modified crops have not been proven safe for human consumption through human clinical trials. I mean, genetically modified ingredients are in 70 to 80% of food eaten in the United States, even though there haven't been any long-term clinical trials on humans to determine whether GMO foods are safe. Scientists still don't know what the long-term effects of significant GMO consumption could be. In fact, Robert Gould, MD, a pathologist at the UC San Francisco School of Medicine, says the contention that GMOs pose no risk to human health can't be supported by studies that have measured a time frame that is too short to determine the effects of exposure over a lifetime. And, according to the Center for Food Safety, a U.S.-based nonprofit organization, each genetic insertion creates the added possibility that formerly non-toxic elements in the food could become toxic. The group says that resistance to antibiotics, cancer, and suppressed immune function are among potential risks of genetic modification using viral DNA.
That last part's kind of off the wall, like with the viral DNA thing. There is a
No, by genetically modifying our food, food, we could end up getting some kind of disorder where we can't take antibiotics for diseases we get. It may alter our DNA as human beings, where that superbug you were talking about earlier could wipe us out.
But I don't understand what the connection is between antibiotics and GMOs, because GMOs is literally just editing a gene to express something differently.
Yeah, but we don't know how that editing could affect us over a long-term time. Maybe it just slowly changes the way we process certain genes or certain DNA.
Okay.
So maybe it affects the way our antibodies work in our bodies.
I mean, the way that I look at this is there's not really a way that you can have any long-term human health trials without actually exposing people to these things. So while you can say that, yeah, we're kind of like guinea pigs in this whole situation, being in a generation that's, supported by 70 to 80% of GMO products now, it is kind of alarming to a lot of people that we're seen as kind of like, guinea pigs. But at the same time, it's essentially the same exact process as selectively breeding over a long course of time. It basically just shortens that amount. Kind of like when, I can't remember the guy's name. He won a Nobel Prize for basically saving the world because he determined that the way that we farm is not going to work once we reach like 8 billion people on this planet. Like eventually there's going to be famines and stuff like that. And so he's like, we got to figure out a way to better fertilize crops and nitrogen, phosphorus or nitrogen. He made basically plant fertilizer and increased our crop yields by millions and basically saved the world because now we can create more crops.
But this last sentence here also goes with that Logan reference you made. The fact that in Logan, what he believes is causing his healing powers to no longer work is poisoning from the adamantium metal that composes his skeleton. I, however, say that's not what it is. I say it's that corporation that has a cure for. I say that's not what it is. I think it's the corporation that has the cure for mutants, basically.
Yeah.
And it puts it into corn. So everything that's made with corn syrup, corn sugar, all of that stuff has the cure for mutant abilities in it.
Yeah.
So everything Wolverine has been eating, drinking for however long it's been is suppressing his abilities. That's how I think they'll end up bringing him back into X-Men movies in the future, is that they could have him come up out of his grave, spoiler alert, because his body finally rid itself of the last of that mutant suppressing gene.
Yeah. Well, I see where you're coming from with that, although I just don't understand how a genetically modified crop can affect our own genes unless it's some sort of like epigenetic type thing, which epigenetics are really interesting too.
What if they start modifying it and putting stuff into it? We don't know what they're putting into it. Like, what if they start modifying this food to alter our DNA?
But how would there's no physical process for it to do that, James, is what I'm saying. Like, there's no way so that'd be just like, okay, I'm eating a fish, therefore I'm eating fish DNA. That fish DNA is going to somehow...
We get mercury poisoning from it.
But that has nothing to do with genes, James. That's a element.
I'm just saying
that's a toxic element.
I'm saying that they could edit our
like
food.
Like lead and paint.
They could edit
something.
our food to slowly affect us.
I don't think it's like that. No. But it also mentions cancer on here, which I would say the reason why we see, and this is just me speculating, I'm not a scientist or anything, but from what I understand is that the longer we live, the more we're going to see cancer. We're increasing life expectancy, but the life expectancy that we're increasing is elderly life. Your cells degenerate over time. The chances of you getting cancer increases exponentially the longer that you live. And I think that because our life expectancy is increasing, we're causing people to live longer, but we're also costing ourselves more in healthcare costs because people get sick a lot more in elderly life, And I think that's the reason why we see a rise in cancer. Also, the suppressed immune function, I think that could also be chalked up to the hygiene hypothesis. And the hygiene hypothesis was brought up in like the early 90s. Again, I can't remember the guy who brought it up, but basically he says we wash our hands constantly. We live in such a sterile world now. The immune system can't build up a response to natural things it comes in contact with. That's why now you'll see more kids with peanut allergies or more kids with asthma because they're never exposed to every little allergen. They just slather themselves up with Germ-X all the time. And that ultimately, by keeping your kids in such a sterile environment all the time, you actually cause them more harm than if you just let them get sick every now and then, That's one.
That seems like an anti-vaxxer kind of statement right there.
No. In fact, vaccines are built upon that proposition that we're going to introduce a dead version of a virus to a person so that their immune system can be able to launch a appropriate response to when they actually encounter that virus out in the wild. So actually, if anything, it supports vaccines and their efficacy. So don't you need your glasses to read the fucking screen, you dumbass? You was already having trouble reading. I blew it up. Now you take your glasses off?
Because they were bothering my ears underneath my headphones.
Oh. Can you not I'd lift them up. No, yeah. No, not God.
Like that?
Yeah. Just put them over the earphone part and let them rest on your nose. What the fuck are you doing?
I don't... Fuck it.
But basically what I'm saying is I think that some of the proposed problems on here seemed like they could be attributed to other things like correlation instead of causation, in my opinion. And that's just my opinion. I'm not supposed to have an opinion, but you know what I mean. But anyway, I'm going to move on to Pro 2.
That's fine.
So this website also says that GMO crops lower the price of food and increase nutritional content, helping to alleviate world hunger. And this one actually has some real world a real world example that I'm going to get into a little bit too. It says the World Food Program, a humanitarian organization, estimates that 821 million people in the world are chronically undernourished, and 1 in 9 people face hunger. Population growth, climate change, overfarming, and water shortages all contribute to food scarcity. GMOs can help address those problems with genetic engineering to improve crop yields and help farmers grow food in drought regions or on depleted soil, thereby lowering food prices and feeding more people. It also says that David Zilberman, PhD, professor of agricultural and resource economics at UC Berkeley, said that GMO crops have raised the output of corn, cotton, and soy by 20 to 30%, allowing some people to survive who would not have without it. If it were more widely adopted around the world, the price of food would go lower and fewer people would die of hunger. To combat vitamin A deficiency, and this is what I was talking about earlier with the example, the main cause of childhood blindness in developing countries, researchers developed a GMO called golden rice that produces high levels of beta carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A. Like your body takes beta carotene and turns it into vitamin A, thus letting your eyes develop more so that you don't have blindness at an early age.
So if you feed your child golden rice from the get-go, will they have like supervision?
Well, see, we live in a developed country, so a lot of our foods are already fortified with vitamins. Like when you buy enriched flour, it's enriched with what? It's enriched with vitamins. It's not just flour by itself. When you get something that's like enriched bread, like Wonder Bread, the reason why it was called Wonder Bread is because they enriched the flour with all of these vitamins and was like, you can get all of your vitamins from eating our bread. It was a selling point, and it turns out that it was something they didn't even think was that important. But it also turns out that Wonder Bread has actually been shown to increase the intelligence of a generation that was raised on that to the one prior because they had more vitamins and
nutrients.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, it is. I think it has a lot of benefits, and especially with golden rice.
Yeah. What's this golden rice?
So yeah, golden rice is produced through genetic modification, and it gives you beta carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A. In the edible parts of rice. It says on Wikipedia it is intended to produce a fortified food to be grown and consumed in areas with a shortage of dietary vitamin A, a deficiency which each year is estimated to kill 670,000 children under the age of 5 and cause an additional 500,000 cases of irreversible childhood blindness.
Oh, that's sad.
Rice is a staple food crop for over half of the world's population, providing 30 to 72% of the energy intake for people in Asian countries and becoming an effective crop for targeting vitamin deficiencies. At the same time, in the U.S. we have salt that's fortified with iodine. You know why iodine's in stuff, right?
No.
It's to prevent goiter, which is swelling of your thyroid glands in your throat. If you just check it out on Google, listeners. Just look up goiter, Goiter. It's a disease that used to affect a lot of people in the early 20th centuries, and they had it looks
balloon
like
neck, almost like a frog, like
yeah, that's what it looked like. And so iodine takes care of that. And so they were like, well, what can we add iodine to that pretty much everybody eats?
Salt.
Well, salt is already a necessary ingredient. You have to eat salt. to survive. So why don't we just add iodine to
Then
salt?
why can't we drink salt water?
Well, because
We have to have water to
You can-
survive, and we have to have salt to survive.
it's called an overdose of salt, just like you can overdose on water too.
What?
Yeah.
You what?
You can overdose on water. You can drink so much water that you can die from it. Yes.
Does it turn you into like 99% water or something?
I don't
Do you
know.
become a jellyfish?
I don't know. I'm not even going to get into that because I'll have to Google it. I'm too lazy to do that. Look it up, listeners. You can overdose on water, though.
Could you imagine? What if it did? What if you drank so much you just became 90% water? But enough with your positive golden rice ending childhood blindness nonsense. Let's get to the real issue. How about the fact that tinkering with the genetic makeup of plants may result in changes to the food supply that induce toxins or trigger allergic reactions? In fact, an article in Food Science and Human Welfare said 3 major health risks are potentially associated with GM foods: toxicity, allergenicity, and genetic hazards. The authors raised concerns that GMO process could disrupt a plant's genetic integrity with the potential to activate toxins or change metabolic toxin levels in a ripple effect beyond detection. That was a point I think that Mark brought up.
Yeah.
Was that one little change could have a ripple effect that we can't detect, that over a long time may cause some serious repercussions. In fact, a joint commission of the World Health Organization, WHO, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, FAO, identified 2 potential unintended effects of genetic modification of food sources: higher levels of allergens in a host plant that contains known allergenic properties, and new proteins caused by the gene insertion that could cause allergic reactions.
I wonder if that has anything to do with that, like the peanut thing. Like it amplifies the effects of allergens in certain plants?
Could be.
Okay.
And the insertion of a gene to modify a plant can cause problems in the resulting food. After Starlink corn was genetically altered to be insect resistant, there were several reported cases of allergic reactions in consumers. The reactions ranged from abdominal pain and diarrhea to skin rashes to life-threatening issues.
That's really interesting. I never heard of that.
Although, speaking of all of a sudden developing allergens,
Yeah.
I think it's called the Lone Star. Have you heard what happens if you get bitten by a Lone Star tick?
Yeah, you get allergic to red meat,
Yeah.
which would suck because I love steak.
Imagine going like walking in a field or in the woods one day, and then all of a sudden you can no longer eat meat.
You know, that's what happened to the guy that was on that plane with Dr. Mike. Do you know about Dr. Mike on YouTube?
Yeah, I follow him.
Yeah, well,
I knew he did a tracheotomy on a plane.
no, he didn't do a tracheotomy. He said he was going to have to if the EpiPen didn't work.
Oh, okay.
So
but
that
it
the dude
did.
could breathe, but the EpiPen worked. Well, they didn't have an EpiPen. They actually had to measure out a dose of epinephrine and actually give him a shot of it on the plane, which is something that he got changed. He got a legislation passed in the United States that makes it required that all airlines carry an EpiPen that's already pre-measured. That way anybody can administer it, not just a doctor. So
I mean, it is one of those
it
rare
makes
times.
sense that would
Well,
be
yeah,
a thing.
because I mean, there is a chance that when you go, is there a doctor on board? There isn't going to be.
Yeah, there's a chance. Yeah.
And then that person's going to die.
Yeah, it just turned out that he was going to Israel for like some sort of like doctor's conference, and this guy was on the plane, and his throat started swelling up, his tongue started swelling up or something, and he, asked stewardess, is there a doctor on board? Like something's wrong, and so he goes over and finds out that this guy is like having an allergic reaction to something, and basically figures out the guy had a steak for breakfast that morning before leaving on the plane, and he had a tick bite. And so it was found later when he landed and everything, we went to a doctor, it was found that he was actually bitten by one of those Lone Star ticks. So that guy can never have red meat again. That's insane.
I actually heard a thing where it's not necessarily a permanent change.
Really?
I think it's something like if they catch it early enough, they can work with it. It's like Lyme disease. If you catch Lyme disease early enough, there's a chance that they can reverse it. Otherwise, you'll end up suffering with it
I think they
forever.
can reverse Lyme disease at just about any stage, because
No,
I heard,
I seem to remember hearing recently that they have to catch it early on.
No, well, not necessarily, because, I don't know. I heard a listener mail on Stuff You Should Know podcast, and it was about this guy who was like, I listened to your podcast about Lyme disease, and it turned out that I was like, hey, my daughter's showing these symptoms, because they thought that she was just becoming developmentally disabled, but they were like, she used to read all the time. She used to, speak very eloquently for her age and everything. And all of a sudden she got like slurred speech and started seeming like she was, being mentally disabled. And so they ran a test and found out she has Lyme disease and put her on treatment, and all of those symptoms were reversed and she went back to her normal self afterwards. So I don't know if there's a point of no return. I mean, I'm sure death would be.
I mean, it's not necessarily death,
Yeah.
but there are people who have to take medication and they suffer from it for life.
Yeah, that would suck.
Permanent tiredness, all sorts of terrible things.
Yeah. I never thought, I'm going back to what you were saying, I never heard about the Starlink corn thing. I'm kind of interested to look that up.
Yeah.
But yeah,
corn.
listeners, and corn is in everything.
Yeah, I know. It is.
Corn syrup, it's in everything.
It's too bad, too, because I don't know. I mean, this is a little off topic.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy sodas when they are made with cane sugar.
Oh, yeah. It
over
tastes
corn
better.
syrup.
I'll admit, I do taste a difference.
Do you think it's got to be a cost thing?
Oh, yeah. It's way cheaper. I mean, we don't have to import the sugar cane, well, the sugar from sugar cane and everything.
I'm just saying, like, it just, the taste is so much better. You would think companies
Although,
would be like, no, the taste is, the better
sugar
taste
cane is
worth.
produced in the South here, in some places. Like, I want to say like Alabama, Mississippi, and stuff like that.
You would just think there'd be some soda companies that were like, no, the taste is just so much better with it.
Yeah.
We're just going to use it. Because I know that's part of the reason why they sell Coca-Cola made in Mexico here in the States.
Yeah.
Is because people say that it's better tasting.
Yeah, I do taste a difference, but it's been shown that your body doesn't have any different of a reaction to high fructose corn syrup versus sugar, because essentially sucralose, which is
the same thing.
It's the same chemical in your body.
I don't know. I just would rather have it taste better.
A lot of people are scared by chemicals. Like, chemicals just sound so artificial, but everything is made of chemicals. Your body's made of all these scary sounding chemicals, but it's just a chain of bonds of atomic,
It's kind of like that picture of the baby doll full of needles.
Yeah.
And they're like, anything looks scary when you take 2 years worth of stuff and put it in instantly.
Yeah.
That's not how
Like
it works.
2 years worth of diapers on top of a baby would be equally as terrifying
as a bunch of needles.
Yeah. But going on to Pro 3. So it says on here, growing GMO crops leads to environmental benefits such as reduced pesticide use, less water waste, and lower carbon emissions, because you can genetically modify plants to where they need less water to grow to maturity. You can make them to where they're naturally resistant or naturally repelling to pests. So they don't even see,
Starlink corn.
Well, but not everything is Starlink corn. If they already found problems with that, I doubt that they still have Starlink corn. Now it's Monsanto corn? What do they call that?
Monsanto. That's like the umbrella corporation of today.
Yeah, but I would also say, Monsanto has done terrible things, but you can't look at what they did with Agent Orange and Roundup and equate that with genetically modifying corn. It's like two totally different processes.
Yeah, that's what they want you to think.
One is creating an herbicide that's literally made to flatten the jungles of Vietnam and make it to where nothing will grow there for 50 years.
You know that played a part in the very first Rambo movie?
Really?
In Rambo, he comes back to the United States because he wants to visit his friend. And when he gets to where his friend lived, it turns out that his mom says, oh, so-and-so died from Agent Orange. Exposure to Agent Orange killed him.
Huh.
I'm just saying, that stuff, man.
Agent Orange was some serious shit. And Roundup was developed from that, which is pretty interesting.
Just terrifying.
Yeah.
Just terrifying.
I mean, it's been shown that Roundup can cause cancer. I mean, try not to eat it. Wash your fruit. Wash your fruits and vegetables, people. If you take nothing...
So they accidentally get some on their hands and they get cancer. Well, that's not exactly their fault, Ryan.
Well, what I'm saying is like the places that produce these vegetables and fruits and stuff, they wash them before they leave, but there can still be trace amounts of this stuff on it. Make sure, if you take nothing else away from this podcast, people...
Wash your fruits and vegetables.
Wash them well.
Or start growing your own fruits and vegetables and get rid of genetically modified food altogether.
And that's fine. We can get more into this later, but that could be beneficial.
It's an alternative to GMOs.
It is an alternative, but
it's urban gardens.
Yeah. Urban gardens, local gardens, like
community gardens.
Home gardens. Yeah.
Imagine if Lexington had a park, or just instead of like a park, had a garden where everybody in town could like plant something, grow something,
Well, we do have a farmer's market. We do have a couple of those. We have Anderson's Farm Market, and we got the one that's over across from Taco Bell that pops up during the summer, but
But the thing is, you know what? You're right, though. It's hard to fight the cheaper prices of GMOs.
Yeah, I mean, do you really think that the markets could adjust now for that? I mean,
if we forced them to,
we'd be definitely eating a lot less fruits and veggies, though.
But anyway, tell me more about this.
So it says the two main types of GMO crops in use today are engineered to either produce their own pesticides or to be herbicide tolerant. More than 80% of corn grown in the U.S. is GMO BT corn, which produces its own Bacillus thuringiensis insecticide. I probably butchered that pronunciation. This has significantly reduced the need for spraying insecticides over cornfields, and dozens of studies have shown that there are no environmental or health concerns with BT corn. Also, I would like to add, by us not spraying all of that stuff, it keeps a lot of those insecticides from getting into the water supply, because it runs off into the ditches, into all that stuff. Our water is treated, but I expect that some of it'll probably still get through to the final.
Yeah, we'd have to
through our tap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It says drought tolerant varieties of GMO corn have been shown to reduce transpiration, which is evaporation of water off of plants, by up to 17.5%, meaning less water waste. Herbicide tolerant GMO soy crops have reduced the need to till the soil to remove weeds. Tilling is a process that involves breaking up the soil, which brings carbon into the surface. When that carbon mixes with oxygen in the atmosphere, it becomes carbon dioxide and contributes to global warming. Reduced tilling preserves topsoil, reduces soil erosion and water runoff, keeping fertilizers out of the water supply, and lowers carbon emissions. The decreased use of fuel and tilling as a result of growing GM crops can lower greenhouse gas emissions as much as removing 12 million cars worth from the roads each year.
That's
so,
pretty
there are
impressive.
some really good benefits for GMOs, but let's go on to your con to this.
Let's go to the last con.
What's your rebuttal?
Well, my rebuttal is this: that certain GM crops harm the environment through the increased use of toxic herbicides and pesticides. Since herbicide-resistant GM crop varieties were developed in 1996, an epidemic of superweeds has developed resistance to the herbicides that GM crops were designed to tolerate. Those weeds are choking crops on over 60 million acres of U.S. croplands, and the solution being presented to farmers is to use more herbicides. This has led to a tenfold increase in the use of the weed killer Roundup, which is made by Monsanto. Oh, maybe we should have just kept reading instead of going off on tangents. The largest GMO seed producer. The increased use of this weed killer, glyphosate, can harm pollinating insects and potentially create health risks for humans ingesting traces of herbicides used on GM crops. When glyphosate is used near rivers, local wildlife is impacted. The use of Roundup, whose active ingredient is glyphosate, can lead to higher mortality rates among amphibians.
They're turning the frickin' frogs
dead. They're turning them dead. Scientists blame Roundup for a 90% decrease in the U.S. monarch butterfly population. On just to think about that, I have to admit, it's been a long time since I've seen a monarch butterfly. Like, I saw a bunch as a kid, but I haven't seen them in a long time.
There's still millions and millions of them. There was pictures of them last year in Mexico, the place where they go to. Well,
it's a 90% decrease in the U.S. monarch butterfly.
Yeah.
So maybe the species overall is fine, but not here in America.
Well, it just travels. They go up to Canada to breed, and then they come back down to Mexico to breed, and then they go back and forth every other year. They're in the other area of the world, Well, actually, no, it's different parts of the year. So in the summer months, they're in Canada. In the winter months, they're in Mexico.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's weird. This is totally a tangent, but monarch butterflies are really interesting because how do they know to go back to Canada? Because the population that goes to Mexico breeds and dies in Mexico.
After they've spent enough time there, done all the drugs and booze they want to do in Mexico, it's time to go home.
No, they don't go back. Their children go back. How do their children know to go back to the same place in Canada? And then they breed and die there. And then their next generation are the ones that go back to Mexico.
Because it's easy. They just grow up in Mexico hearing all the wonderful stories of Canada. And when they're finally full grown, they're like, you know what? I want to go to Canada to see what it's like.
It's just so interesting.
And then their children hear all about Mexico and they go, well, you know what? I want to see what Mexico looks like. And they fly down to Mexico and it just repeats.
Say what to Neo.
Say what to Neo. If you listen to last week's episode, you'll understand that.
Yeah.
And let me finish.
Yeah.
A report from the Canadian Biotechnology Action Network found that GM crops have also had a number of impacts on biodiversity. Herbicide-tolerant crops reduce weed diversity in and around fields, which in turn reduces habitat and food for other important species.
I'll give you that.
This is what gives me my question.
Yeah.
You've heard of kudzu. Is kudzu related to this issue?
No, kudzu is an invasive species. It was brought from Japan.
I know that the only thing that cures it is like sheep and goats because they eat it.
Pigs too, yeah. If you can eat all of the roots and everything, you can get it up. But also the kudzu thing is overblown. Like there was something that was, I want to say it was released in the early 20th century that was saying like 90 million acres of the South has been completely covered by kudzu, and they found later from surveys it's like tiny fraction of that. Like it's really relegated to areas that people don't tread. If you were to start inhabiting an area, it would retreat. Like it doesn't stay forever
until it gathers its strength and decides to take over.
But kudzu is invasive because it doesn't have any natural real predators here in the U.S. Whereas in Japan, there's a type of animal that like exclusively
which
eats it.
We do not want to bring over here, because if we bring that over here, then that's going to become a problem real quick.
You know, they were going to bring hippopotamus to Louisiana for some reason.
No, please no. They kill a lot of people. Like there's some.
This was like 1800.
I know, but
somebody was like, we should bring hippopotamus to Louisiana.
I've read that they're super dangerous animals. Like they're very deadly.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be crazy though? Hippopotamus in the deep South.
I want me some hippo meat. Give me that hippo barbecue.
Oh, they'd have a Cajun accent.
I can't.
I can't do it.
All I can think of is the Water Boy, and the only thing I know from that is, what? How? And where the heart is? Like he was saying home is where the heart is, but like no one could understand him. Remember that character?
No, his home is where you make it. And he's like, oh, you like to see homos naked.
Nah, home, where you make it?
But just if you take anything away from this episode,
wash your fruits and vegetables.
Wash your fruits and vegetables, but also understand that we don't currently have all the facts right now surrounding GMOs.
So you need to make up your own decisions.
Yeah, you really need to make up your own decisions. Like there's nothing wrong with eating organic, but just know that your choice of eating organic is going to consume more water. There are downsides to eating organic. I mean, not for you personally, but maybe for the environment, because GMO crops have been shown to reduce waste in a lot of areas. So
we talked about it causing possible water pollution.
Yeah.
That raises a question to me. I am from the north, and I don't want to get into a whole south versus north thing.
Yeah.
But up north, when there is a base of water that is used as a town's drinking water, you are not allowed to boat, you are not allowed to fish, you are not allowed to swim in it. Here in Lexington, we get all of our drinking water from Beach Lake, which allows fishing, boating, swimming, and
I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't allow boating or fishing or anything in a body of
drinking water. If it's a body of water that's used as drinking water, it cannot be touched by man. It has to be left alone.
Well, see, it's moved from those areas to other holding tanks and reservoirs.
But the water from Beach Lake tastes so bad.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. The city water tastes awful.
It might be your own thing, because my water tastes fine, and I get city water too. Mine comes straight from that water tower up the street.
No, the city water from every place in Lexington tastes bad. It tastes bad, and I wonder if it's because they have to filter it so heavily. All the chemicals they have to use to get rid of all the stuff from humans swimming in it and fishing. Tell me it's not polluted. They have signs saying you can't eat the fish from the lake more than 3 times in a year.
Yeah.
Or you could get cancer.
Yeah.
How is that good?
I don't think that...
You're just shrugging it off, and it's like, what do you mean shrug?
I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with boating or anything like that. That's just the...
Putting fuel and all their chemicals in the water by boating.
Well, yeah, but the water is treated.
Putting contaminants... Yeah, it's treated, but it's so heavily treated with so many chemicals.
I mean, you can say that, but I mean, at my parents' house where they have well water, the water there tastes weird to me too.
No, well water tastes good. I grew up with well water as well.
It depends on where you get it. And you also have to wonder, is anything leaching into my well? I don't know. It's 100 meters underground. You know, at least in the city, you know, all the water that goes to that water tower comes through the water treatment plant, and it's all treated and tested regularly to make sure that it's safe to consume.
Bad.
It doesn't taste bad to me. I don't know why you think that. Like, I mean, maybe at your apartment it tastes funny.
No, I everywhere I've lived in Lexington that's had city water,
yeah,
it has not tasted good.
Yeah, but going back to what we were saying, make your own decision on this. But all in all, like my point is that so far GMOs have been found to not be harmful to humans. As far as we know, there's no scientific evidence that says the fact that we have genetically modified an organism has been harmful to humans. Not directly anyway. Like you said with the Starlink corn, it was like it affected like the allergenicity of the organism and thus increased like allergen response in people and stuff like that. Which, yeah, that's a downside. But I would say that the benefits outweigh the risks personally. But like I said, I'm not going to make anybody eat GMOs.
That doesn't want to.
If you want to eat organic, that's perfectly fine. And going back to what we were saying, eating organic, and if you have a home garden or an urban garden or something like that, that could reduce the amount that we have to use GMOs too, because you'd be making your own vegetables to eat.
Well, I would just like to go back to what you said earlier about how there haven't been any noted long-term effects in humans yet.
Yeah.
As Spock said in the original series, in the episode Space Seed, which is where we first saw Khan, which would then, decades later lead to Star Trek II Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to come back to this topic in, say, 30, 40 years and see what we have learned.
I agree.
Maybe we should keep this one in mind and 10, 15 years down the road, see if anything has changed with GMOs.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I'm not saying just forget about it and don't keep a close eye on what companies are doing. I think that everybody should do more research into what exactly they did, because, I mean, you've got, there's an instance where they have genetically modified like spinach to be frost resistant by taking genes from an icy river type fish and taking genes that help it survive in cold conditions and put that gene in spinach and actually made spinach thrive in colder climates. I mean, that's why I think people have such a problem with this kind of genetic modification instead of like selective breeding, is because
what's to stop us from doing it to humans? What's to stop us from genetically modifying humans one day?
Well, right,
and literally creating cons, like literally creating genetically modified human beings.
Well, right now the UN has a ban on human genetic modification. I think early last year, there was some Chinese scientist that genetically modified humans for the first time, and he created twins that are resistant to HIV. They carry the one gene that makes you immune to contracting HIV. And he was like, this could be something that could solve the HIV problem, is if, every baby was treated with this genetic modification, you could have an entire generation of people who carry this gene
who cannot have AIDS.
That cannot get AIDS, cannot get HIV. And also, their children would be immune to it too, because it also alters their germ cells, which means their sperm and their eggs carry that gene over to the next generation.
It could honestly, legitimately, to destroy HIV, we need something like that, because
not necessarily.
We don't know how HIV started, right?
Well, there's already testing going on to show that to create a vaccine that can make you resistant to HIV. So there are other methods that are being introduced instead of going the genetic modification route, but currently they're like, this should be a last resort. Like, if there's absolutely no other way that we can eradicate some sort of disease, we should not use this until we're absolutely certain that it'll work. And I mean, the scientific community like condemned this guy for doing what he did, because he didn't report it until after he'd already done it. It was really,
look, if you
really
want to make
fishy.
if you want to make breakthroughs in science, you have to break some eggs.
You have to be a mad scientist.
Not necessarily a mad scientist, but you do have to be like, you know what? They're not going to let me do this. I've just got to do it and then report the findings.
Yeah. So, James, you want to tell them some quick facts about GMOs before we head out?
Well, yeah. In fact, did you know an estimated 94% of all soybean and 92% of all corn grown in the U.S. is genetically modified, and around 75% of all processed foods in the U.S. contain GMO ingredients?
No, I did not know that. Although the 70 to 80% thing that we mentioned earlier of the corn was pretty indicative of that. Also, at least 2/3 of all genetically modified corn and half of all GM soy grown in the U.S. are converted into animal feed.
Wow.
Yeah. Most of the plants that we produce are made to feed other things that we eat.
Maybe we should be studying what effect GMs have on animals.
On livestock? Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe.
Did you know, in 1994, the Flavor Saver...
This is what we was talking about, the tomato, the Flavor Saver tomato.
The Flavor Saver tomato became the first genetically modified food to be approved for public consumption by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The tomato was genetically modified to increase its firmness and extend its shelf life.
So more people would buy it. Yeah. Otherwise, they just rot on the shelves, you know? There are currently 10 genetically modified crops in production in the United States, also referred to as genetically engineered or GE crops, including corn, soybeans, and cotton.
Wow. Can they really get away with calling them GE crops?
I mean, genetically engineered, genetically modified.
Well, no, GE, I'm thinking about
General Electric.
Dude, don't they have like the copyright on GE?
Not in all aspects of the English language. You know what I mean? Like they okay, when it comes to tech, yes. When it comes to food, no.
Until GE starts making food.
Oh God. They'll be the new Monsanto.
Did you know 49% of U.S. adults believe that eating GMO foods are worse for one's health. 44% say they are neither better nor worse, and 5% believe they are better, according to a 2018 peer review center research.
If you want to know the way I fall on that is I fall into the 44%. Like I don't think currently, from what we understand, that it's better or worse. And I even sometimes fall into the 5%, especially with stuff like golden rice. That's clearly been an enormous.
I see your point.
I mean, come on, you're keeping hundreds of thousands of kids from getting irreversible
I think I fall
blindness.
under we need to research more, like we said earlier. That's why I've never condemned flat Earth, because I do think it's a dumb theory, obviously, but I can respect the idea behind it, which is we shouldn't just take everything that we are spoon-fed. We should wonder, think critically, research. We should look into everything instead of just accepting what we're told by the government.
They should practice what they preach then, because like all of their evidence is confirmation.
But I almost wonder if that's why it was started as more of a don't just believe everything you're told.
Yeah.
Like research for yourself, learn your own opinions, look out for the facts.
Yeah.
So I think that's something they should take away. They need to take away wash your fruits and vegetables. And when it comes to stuff like this, vaccines, abortions, all these hot topics, don't just cling to your beliefs because of your political party or how you were raised. Actually research, look it up. Look at facts.
And when we say research, we mean read neutral research. No, read peer-reviewed scientific journal papers. If you really want to you cannot get a Google degree. Like, you can find good information on Google, but Google's going to present you with anything that gets the most clicks, the most people pay Google to get on the top of their search engine results. Yeah, it's called SEO. And so you can't really trust everything that search engines give to you.
You mean that everything the internet says isn't true?
No. In fact, I'd probably say like 70% of the shit on the internet is probably false information.
What?
It's all being coy, James.
Fake news.
But anyway, we hope that you took away something interesting from this podcast, from this Hot Takes episode. If you haven't already, check us out on Facebook at JRamandBillyPod. You can also find us on Twitter at the same handle. You can find us on YouTube. If you check the description of the podcast, you'll find a link to our YouTube channel where we do Let's Plays and stuff like that every now and then. If you like this episode and you happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, give us a review. We would highly, highly appreciate that.
You can also listen to us on Spotify or Podbean as well.
Yep.
And without further ado, this is J-Ram.
And this is Billy.
Have a good night.